Hey, what's going on, champs? I'm Aaron Deliosa. Welcome to an Immigrant's Life podcast. My podcast about immigrants, immigration, and everything in between. Last Tuesday of November, last episode for November. God damn, time flies. But we're still here telling stories while laughing and sometimes crying about it, but overall enjoying the process. Speaking of process, if you want to join the complete process, check us out on Instagram and Facebook at An Immigrant's Life. Listen to the podcast on YouTube and however you listen to your podcast. So, as I said before, but I'll say it again, if you're an Apple Podcast listener and you want to support us, give the podcast a 5-star rating and a review. A great example is a review from H.L. Woodlet. It says, "Going to share with my newcomers ELL students. Love this idea and the YouTube channel as well. Going to share these stories with my multilingual newcomer students." See? Short and sweet. And we'll be forever grateful to you. So far, we have close to 20 ratings, and I'd like to increase that. So please help us multiple those reviews. If you leave a review, I promise I will read it on here and give you a shout out. All right, I'm going to shut up now. Let's talk about the episode. This week's guest lived in a very unusual way. She's an Indian American who grew up in neither India nor America. Ooh, intrigue. Also, her company just released their history podcast. You can find the link in the description of this episode, and it's really, really good. So you should check it out. So, without further ado, let's get into the show. Isa, dalawa, tatlo. Today's guest is a self-proclaimed feminist who watches The Bachelor. She's also an accomplished marketer and now a founder of a media project called Kahaani. Everyone, please welcome Niki Aggarwal. Hey, Nikki, how you doing?
I am doing so well, Aaron. How are you?
I'm good. Nice to meet you, and thank you for coming on the podcast.
Oh, I'm so excited to get to have a conversation with you.
Really? Why?
Oh, because I feel like you get kind of like deep answers out of your guests. And I love getting to talk to people that have like very different immigrant and diaspora perspectives from mine.
Yeah, I like that too. Oh, before we continue, would you like to promote anything?
Well, with Kahaani, I think there's two things for any teachers or students listening. We just put out the Kahaani Teachers Library, where any history teacher can find primary and secondary sources. For non-teachers, we also just put out the History Mystery Box, which makes for a good holiday gift where you can experience history at home.
Is that the one like the puzzles?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I was looking at it like, this is cool. I like this.
Oh, good. Well, you know where to find it, and you should order a couple.
Yeah, for sure. So I read that your name is actually Nikki. It's not a nickname. Is that true?
That is true. So I am the second kid in my family, and my sister's name is Juhi, a very beautiful, like traditional Indian name. And then when it came time to name me, my parents had two issues. One, they wanted to find like a name that was more easily recognizable in the US, because everyone would like get confused with my sister's name. And then second, though, so they were thinking of names, but the other issue was that they didn't want to find out the sex of the baby while my mom was pregnant. So they just decided, my sister was like, well, we should call the thing a name. Like, I don't want to refer to my sibling as like it. And so my sister, who was 5 years old at the time, was so precocious. She was like, well, you know what? I know that Nikki is like a name for both boys and girls. We're just going to call the baby Nikki until it comes out. But by the time I came out, my parents were so used to calling me Nikki that ended up being my name.
How did you feel about that?
I mean, I didn't have a choice at the time. I think right now I feel pretty good about it. I mean, I feel way too much pride about the fact that like most people don't have the name Nikki. Like it's a nickname for most people, but like I haven't yet met another Nikki.
I know. I think I know one. And
And
then
their full name is Nikki?
no, 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 just a
That's what I'm
nickname.
saying. I don't know anyone else whose full name is Nikki.
Yeah, exactly. So I know you're fond of history, so let's talk about Nikki's personal history by starting at the beginning. Where were you born?
I was born in Naperville, Illinois, which what's it famous for? Naperville's famous for being voted like the best city to live in America for a few years.
Really?
Yeah. It's pretty nice, like a nice suburb outside of Chicago. But when I was 5, we moved to Vienna, Austria, which coincidentally a few years later was named the best city to live in the world. So
You're the good luck.
clearly,
There's a trend here. There's a trend.
I like to say it's a direct correlation. So yeah, born in Naperville, lived there for 5 years, but then my dad got a job in Vienna, Austria, so we moved to Europe.
Your parents, as you mentioned, you're Indian descent. Did they move to the U.S. first, or were they second generation?
So my mom, they both were born in India. My mom grew up in the US. She moved to Michigan when she was 6 years old. And then my dad, actually, he first headed to Canada for his PhD. So he was in Edmonton for his PhD. And then when they got married, they moved to the US.
They like cold places?
Clearly, Edmonton, Michigan, Chicago.
Was there a reason why your mom moved to Michigan?
This was in the 60s. And so this was right after the Immigration Act was passed in the US, in which it meant that like people with getting masters and like PhD degrees were now being welcomed in from like, you know, Asia and other continents. And so my grandfather came in 66 to pursue his higher education.
And then you guys moved to Vienna. How old were you when you moved to Vienna?
5.
5 years old. Man. So you don't remember the States? A little bit, maybe.
I don't remember from ages 0 to 5. I don't really remember the United States of America as like a country, but I of course have like snippets of memory of like my preschool and my backyard. But we moved when I was 5, and then every summer we would come back to the US to spend the summer with my mom's family. So I do feel like I remember the US as a kid because we were here every summer.
Oh, for the summer only. So what kind of child were you?
Ooh. I don't know how to answer that question. What kind of child were you?
Yeah, were you a troublemaker? Were you a good kid?
No. I was like very straight-laced. I used to be very shy. Not anymore, but I used to be very shy, I got along with adults at a very young age, for better or for worse. I loved school. And although I didn't like history until very late, but I loved like math. And yeah, it was very like, I don't know if I met my younger self today, I don't know if I think I would be like, oh, she's cute. Like, okay, cool. But like, I don't know if I'd be best friends with my younger self. I would just be like, she's a little nerd.
Yeah, I see that fascinating that if you look back and think about your old self, you're like, yo, like me, for example, right? I think about my high school self, I'm like, yo, what a douche.
Oh no. What made you not so great in high school?
I mean, it was okay. It's just like, I talk a lot and speak loud without no essence. I still speak without essence, but I think I'm better now.
But like, do you feel like you were obnoxious in high school?
Obnoxious? Maybe a little bit, but I'm always been funny. Like I love making people laugh, so I was good with that. But obnoxious, I don't think so. Not so much, I guess. But like you were saying that you look back and like your younger self is, what a nerd. Like she doesn't have that darkness in her yet. Am I right?
So true. I was full of light then. No darkness whatsoever.
So describe how growing up in Vienna was like for you.
So it was an odd experience in that we went to the American International School. So we very much lived in a bubble because we went to an American school. So there were a lot of like Americans around us, and there was a lot of like American culture, even though like obviously we lived in Vienna, Austria. And back in the 90s when we moved, there wasn't like Vienna today is like one of the most internationally renowned cities, and like everyone goes there. They love being tourists there. But in the 90s, it did not have that reputation. And so like, I say that because it wasn't as international. So like, it's not like people spoke English regularly when you would go to shops and restaurants and things like that. It was not nearly as clean. It was quite dirty actually. So it like looked very different. Yeah. They did some really interesting work in the early 2000s to like transform the city to become like a tourist hub. And they were very successful. But back then, like all the streets were just covered in like dog shit and like horse shit. And because there's more dogs than kids there. And like, it was just very, very different. It was just kind of like gloomier back then. And anyway, so we lived in like, so we were part of this American bubble. So we didn't ever fully integrate into Austria. Like my parents never became fluent in German. We weren't really friends with that many like actual Austrians other than like the few that attended the school. The other thing that was weird is it felt very, we always felt like as if we were in a state of transition because most of the people that were attending the school were expats of some sort. So they were only there for like 3-4 years usually, and then they would leave. Whereas like, because of my dad's job, we ended up being there for a long, long time. And so it was weird because if you look back, I remember my high school graduation, they had the students stand up according to like how long they'd been at the school. And it was like, it was a very odd tradition, but it was like me and 2 Austrian kids. And that's it. That had been there for like since kindergarten. And then like everyone else had just gotten there in the last like 3-4 years. So it was a weird experience in that like you had a new life every few years.
Yeah. But can you go outside the bubble, as you say, and be friends with other people?
Oh, you could. But I mean, I don't know about you, but as a kid, my whole life was around the school, in that like those were my friends. Those are the people I hung out with. Like that's who you'd have like play dates with as an elementary kid. And that's who you'd hang out with in high school. So you could go outside, but like everything was like any clubs I was in, that was part of the school. So like, it's not that you couldn't leave the bubble. It's just that it was a very all-encompassing bubble.
Yeah. Like, it's like, there's no point to go outside. You have everything here.
Yeah. Yeah. Like not only if there's no point, but like, where's the opportunity as a kid? Like, you know, you wake up, you get ready for school, you go to school, you get home, you do your homework, you go to bed. Like, where's the time that you would really interact with outside of the school life?
Well, for you, because you were a good kid, like you say, you were a nerd. If it was me, dude, I would be walking around the city and finding out trouble, man.
I guess that does really betray my like naivete, because that was my whole life, school and like my friends from school.
Yeah, I mean, good for you, but I'll be like, yo, I don't want to do homework. I'm gonna go find something there.
I love that. That was never even a thought in my mind. Like, it never occurred to me that I could just not do my homework. I didn't even realize that was an option.
I don't think I have done homework, but let's say I have 1,000 of homework. I probably did like 10 of them. I hate homework. I hate it. Like,
why do you think you hated it?
Because I just spent like 8 hours at school. Why would I need to come home and do more school?
Fair.
You know what I mean? So the group in your bubble, was it diverse?
Was it diverse? It was diverse in some ways, and some ways not. So I was the only brown kid. And like our family was one of the only brown families many years. Occasionally there'd be like one or two other brown families.
How did you feel when you say like, oh, another one?
I would feel weird because like I kind of thought that we would be best friends. I'd be like, oh, we should like hang out. And they didn't, but they would often be very different because maybe they weren't like, they might be brown, but they weren't like from America. They were maybe from like the UK, or they had grown up in like Africa. And so like we didn't actually share that much cultural background. So I actually shared a lot more cultural background with like the white American expats. Okay. And so that's who I hung out with. Mostly white American expats. But like there was a lot of like Korean and Japanese kids in our school. And then of course like the Austrians. So we had every type of European. So every flavor of white existed at our school. Every flavor.
Every flavor. Like the whitest white to the pink to the almost red.
It's like the makeup palettes where they have like 10 different shades of quote unquote nude. And then there's like one brown and one black. That was basically our school.
Did you ever question that? Like, why am I the only, brown person here?
I didn't ever question it. Like I knew why. I was like, oh, this is because the thing is, for my 5 years in Chicago, I knew that there were a lot of brown people there, and I knew that there were a lot of brown people in the US. And of course, like when I would visit India, I knew. So I knew that there were brown people on this earth. And I just knew we were in the wrong place. And so I never felt like Austria was home. And I'm sure that was a huge reason why, because we didn't blend in, we didn't fit. And I was like, no, my people are either in the US or they're in India, but they're not here.
Well, actually, you guys are all over the world.
Clearly not in big enough numbers for my liking.
Right, eh? How long did you stay there? What age did you leave?
So we were there for 2 stints. So I was there from ages 5 to 13. And then my family did a quick move back to the US. But then 2 years later, my dad was like, psych, we're moving back. And so then at 15, we moved back to Vienna. And then I stayed there till 18 when I graduated high school. And then I came to the US.
How did you feel when he says, psych? Guess what? Back to the white people.
I was devastated because I had been like really finally integrated into my new life. I loved being closer to family. I like felt, I don't know, just like life was better. So I was really devastated to move back. But that said, I had a pretty good, like once I like integrated back in, I was happy.
Mm-hmm. And when did the darkness come in? Because you told me earlier you were a very sweet child. When did the darkness come in? Is it that time?
I think so. I think maybe there was some residual trauma, but I think part of it is that I made a conscious choice in high school to not be shy anymore. Mm-hmm. And so I wonder if like the cost of not being shy meant that I also had to become like harder and snarkier too. I don't know. All I know is now I'm no longer considered, no one ever uses the term sweet to describe me anymore. So something changed.
What made you decide to not be shy anymore?
I was tired of it and I was bored of it. And I was like, I don't like feeling like trapped anymore. And like, I can't believe I had this much like self-awareness at 15. I wish I had that now. I feel like I've become less wise as I've grown up. I feel like I used to be much wiser. But at 15, I was like, okay, I'm going to have to move back there. I don't want to have to go back to that persona that I was, because in the 2 years in the US, I'd grown a lot. And I was like, I don't want to go back to being that person. And I realized like, oh, I don't have to go back to being that person, because again, one of the beauties of that school is that the population would cycle out every couple of years. So by the time I moved back, most people didn't know me. So it was great. I could just be a whole new person.
Yeah, like one year you'll be like the sweet and nice Nikki. The next year you're like, yo, guess what? It's gonna be the bitch Nikki this year.
Exactly.
And no one will question.
To be fair, my version of like this badass girl is like the girl who like was in the school musical. So like, I don't know if that's that like audacious, but that was my version of like a transformation.
Nice. So around those times, did you get in trouble?
No.
Still a nice Nikki.
I was still a rule follower.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, I'll just say that. I was still very much a rule follower.
Where did that come from?
I mean, I don't know. On one hand, it's very easy to be like immigrant parents, strict, like you have to do what you're supposed to do. But like I'm saying, like I never even had the desire to do something bad, right? Like, or go against the rules.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, I just don't really know where it came from in that sense, because part of it does feel innate, although I'm sure much of it was socialized. I just don't, it's hard to discern what is me versus what is society
mm-hmm.
and what is culture. Yeah, but I would say all three of my, like I have two other siblings and all three of us are very much rule followers.
Really? Lucky mom and dad.
They are very lucky.
Right? Tell them every day. You're like, yo, mom, dad, you guys got lucky, man. Right?
That is, I should remind them. Happy Father's Day. You got very lucky. Aren't you lucky? You should be happy.
Yeah, be proud and you're super lucky. Right? So, many of my guests claim that they went through dual identity, but I feel you're a different case because you're ethnically Indian, and then you grew up in Austria, and then you're American. Having said all those, can you tell us any instances how you finally consolidate your identity?
Ooh. Honestly, I struggled with that for a while because I think so growing up in Austria, I didn't really want to claim the Indian identity because it felt so different and like no one else had it. And so I just wanted to be American. Then when I moved back to the US for college, I very much wanted to claim my Indian identity because there were so many other Indian Americans. Like I wanted to be part of that like culture. I saw it as special and I wanted to relate to these other brown American kids. But in college, I discovered that I wasn't the typical Indian American because I grew up in Austria. And so I didn't have the same reference points. I didn't have the same cultural experiences and I didn't have the same like connections. And so I felt very much like I wasn't actually like a real Indian American because I didn't have any of those experiences. And so I felt like once again, like an alien of like, oh my God, I don't belong here. And so I think it's only like, honestly, now the last couple of years of starting Kahaani, where I'm like, finally feel like I'm leaning into all three parts of my identity and saying, hey, like brown skin, brown parents, like I want to explore South Asia, but you can hear I'm very, very American, Midwestern in terms of accent. And in terms of like the storytelling we do, it's very much like an international perspective and a global perspective. And I think that probably comes from my background.
Yeah. So when you were in the States and you said, oh, I don't belong here, for me, it sounds like you didn't feel that you belong in any group.
Yeah, I didn't feel like so when I was in college, I felt like I was American. Like I didn't have to question that I was American, but I couldn't drill down that identity any further because I obviously didn't fit in with the white Americans, but I didn't fit in with the Indian Americans. So who did I fit in with? And I didn't fit in with the international kids either. So I didn't fit in with anyone. And I think the icing on the cake was that I went to the University of Michigan. I applied for residency. Like I was from Michigan, and the university denied my claim saying, no, you have to pay out of state tuition. And in my appeal letter, I said, look, I am a citizen of the United States of America. I'm saying my state is Michigan. If Michigan's not my state and you're saying Michigan's not my home, what state of the United States of America am I a resident of? And they didn't answer that, of course. They were like, just give us your money. But I think that really illustrates this idea of like, yes, I was American, but I didn't actually fit into the physical geography of America in terms of roots.
That's so weird. But social life, who were you hanging out with?
So my freshman year, I tried to hang out with like the Indian Americans, but I just like didn't fit. Then I ended up becoming an RA in the dorms, and those became my friends because I found, one, Michigan does a really good job of like recruiting and hiring a diverse set of RAs. And so it was like one of the most diverse groups on campus was the groups of RAs. And it was all like people who were interested in the similar things of, like I was, which was like social justice and trying like self-growth and like this beautiful combination. And so, those were my people.
For the people that doesn't know what's an RA is, could you please explain it?
Oh yeah, a residential assistant. So the person who, it's like the classroom monitor. It's like the nerd version for college, right? You got to be like, don't do this, don't do that. Although I will say by my senior year, I was a terrible RA because I was the one that was like trying to get them to drink with me in the hall, even though they were very much not supposed to. So I guess I was not a good RA.
I feel like, again, there's a pattern here. You come in very sweet, very nice, rule followers. And then at the end, the darkness comes in like, Nikki, come, join us.
Maybe it's more of like I'm pulling a Picasso where it's like you got to learn the rules first before you can break them.
I don't know. I think it's something else.
You don't like this literary. I always try to elevate my bad behavior.
I love Picasso, but I don't think this doesn't fit. I don't think so. So I saw that you were a member or you're a chair of Yoni Ki Baat, if I pronounce that properly. How important was that for you? And did that help you integrate with the South Asian group?
Yeah, I think that was absolutely it because I realized like, okay, I didn't fit into the general blanket of South Asian Americans, but I found my niche of like, oh, like progressive women who are like really, really digging deep into what does it mean to be a South Asian American woman. I was like, oh, these are my people. So I discovered that like my junior year and felt very seen for the first time. And that's why I ended up, like chairing it and doing a bunch of organizing for it because I felt like I'd found my people, and not only like did I feel like I belonged, but I felt like they were making me a much more introspective version of myself, which is always a delightful thing.
Yeah, exactly. For the people that doesn't know what Yoni Ki Baat means and what was the goal of the group?
So it is a South Asian version of Eve Ensler's The Vagina Monologues. And so there was a group of women called the South Asian Sisters, actually, that were here in the Bay Area. And this was about 15 years ago where they saw the show The Vagina Monologues, which is this incredible, groundbreaking work where Eve Ensler had written this play of a set of monologues that women would perform to like discuss gender and sex and identity in really new ways and breaking taboos. And so these women saw it and were like, what if there was a Desi version of this? And they made two big changes. So one, they sourced instead of one woman writing the show, they sourced scripts and pieces from the community to better represent the community in multiple voices. And then 2, they actually have a very decentralized structure. So they started Yoni Ki Baat here in the Bay Area, but then they said like, okay, if you're a South Asian woman elsewhere, you can start your own show and make it your own. So like by the time I was in college, there was like a strong like chapter at Michigan, which was very much focused on like the college version and like the South Asian woman's experience in college. And it was so cool. Like every year the show is totally different because they source new pieces from the community.
Mm-hmm. Did you perform?
Oh yeah. I loved performing.
What about it?
I love performing when I have a script because then I can like practice and practice and practice.
The rule follower.
Yes. And then I get to be the center of attention and get all these like this validation and these words of affirmation. So, and also there's just like something so cathartic about performing a piece that like means so much to you in front of a group of strangers. And like
you wrote him?
Feelings.
Did you write your piece?
A couple of years. Yeah. There were a couple of years that I wrote my own pieces. And then a couple of years I performed other people's pieces.
Oh, so you collaborate.
Yeah. I mean, each show is different, but the way that the Michigan show worked is we would do a call for scripts and we would say like any South Asian woman in the community, if you have like a story you want to share, send us the piece, like write a script and send it to us. And then we will pick 10. And then if you wrote it, you get the choice if you want to perform it yourself. But if not, we will then open it up to auditions and have people audition to perform that piece.
What is it, like poetry or just essay? What kind of piece?
A couple are poetry. Monologue. So the only rule is like it's monologue. So it's a one woman thing. Each piece is just like one person on stage. Some are just kind of like essays, like personal essays that you're saying aloud. Others are more like almost like some were like more like stand-up comedy, almost like just coming up there and telling like some jokes, but like that were very near and dear to someone's heart. Others kind of like in a play where a character will come up and like have like a 5-minute soliloquy almost. Some pieces were like that.
So you graduated Michigan. Did you transfer or did you move to the Bay instantly, or was there like?
There was a 3-month transition period where I was unemployed and living in my parents' house. Like, oh my God, I need to get out of here. Someone hire me. And then I finally got hired and I rushed to the Bay Area. I got this like fellowship in nonprofit management and I came out here.
Did you, and was there like who helped you move? Like by yourself or?
Just me. Yeah. My cousins helped me pack up my stuff from college. We put it up in suitcases and boxes. And then I flew on I think I flew in like Spirit Airlines when I moved. And I just had like 4 giant boxes and suitcases and rolled them all. I took the shuttle to I had a cousin that lived in San Francisco.
Okay.
So I brought all my luggage to her tiny apartment with like her baby. And I stayed there for a week until I found a place.
Were you afraid to move by yourself?
No. I've never been afraid of like doing things myself or moving. Like I moved. Yeah, like I would take back in college, I took summer internships in places I'd never been. Then I moved out here in San Francisco. Then like when I was 27, I moved to India. I didn't know anyone there. Like I should be more scared, but I don't. Moving and doing things by myself does not scare me. Other things scare me, but not that.
So is this internship, what were you doing in the Bay?
It was this fellowship in nonprofit management. So I was working at a nonprofit here called TechSoup, and I was working on their strategy team. Because at the time, I really was interested in creating change through like nonprofit organizations. And like, that's how I thought I was going to make my mark on the world, was like through nonprofits. And so that's why I was working there.
And that's led you to, what was the name? The secure job? I forgot the name.
Yeah, I guess it very weirdly led me to joining a cybersecurity startup. I'll say it led me in two ways. One, it got me out here to the Bay Area where I learned like, oh, there's this whole thing called like startups, which I had never encountered because I was like, not anti-capitalist, but I was very much like the liberal college student of like social justice, nonprofits, government, like private companies are bad. And then I came out here to San Francisco. I was like, oh, okay.
Money's good.
He's necessary, but also just like, okay, this is actually, you know, I'd been assigning value judgments to what ends up becoming just tax statuses of for-profit or nonprofit. Ultimately, each organization can be good or bad on its own. And so I was interested in this idea of startups and being able to like have an idea and create massive impact. And so that is what got me into the cybersecurity company, because I was like, I want to explore entrepreneurship and I want to understand like how you make a huge change in this world.
And then you decided to quit the job.
Yeah, because after 4 years there, I was like, okay, cool. I understand how to make a change. Now I want to make the change that I've been looking for, which is Kahaani and like really changing the narrative of history. And so I was like, all right, let's do this. And so I quit. And of course, you know, starting your own thing is never as easy. Like, I didn't think it would be easy. I knew from the beginning, like, this is going to be hard. I just didn't know how it was going to be hard. So like, I couldn't know that it was going to be difficult. Like, I know if I ever to have kids, being a parent is going to be hard, but I don't know how. Like, I don't know where in my body I'm going to hurt the most.
Yeah. Or when it's 3 a.m. and the baby is crying.
Exactly. Like, I don't know what's going to feel the hardest for me until I'm in it. So similarly, like, I knew on an intellectual level, this is going to be difficult, but I had no idea how difficult.
Like you said earlier, is that naivete or something else?
Oh, I'm sure there's a little bit of naivete of like, let's just do this thing. Like, what's the worst that could happen? Like, so many bad things could have happened and still could happen. But
of course,
I don't think about that for better or for worse.
So how disappointed were your parents when you quit your job? And how worried were they?
My parents were extremely supportive.
Oh, it's awesome.
Yeah. They were like, yeah, go try something out. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. At this point, now 2 years in, my dad's like, so what's the plan? And I'm like, we're working on it. We're working on it. Big things are coming.
Big things.
But otherwise, but he did call me up today and he's like, you know what? I think you're right. I think you're on the right track. I think you're about to do big things. I was like, okay, Dad, thanks.
What made him say that?
I mean, I spent like an hour and a half yesterday walking him through my plan of like, hey, this is what we've done over the last like 8 months. Here's the next 8 months. Basically, stop bugging me to go to grad school. And it worked. The pitch worked.
Yeah, good for you. So let's talk about Kahaani and how did you start and everything.
Everything. Oh, goodness. So like, oh gosh. Okay, fine. We'll start from the beginning, I guess. That's probably the best place to start. I had the idea that I wanted to change the historical narrative because I personally had always been interested in learning more about like South Asian history. But it always felt like it was on the periphery, like, oh, it's just not important to like American life. And that's why I don't know it. And so my mind was blown when I finally realized the truth, which is like, no, it's not that it wasn't important. It's that we have written out its importance from the narrative. And so we've just erased those parts, or we've rewritten some parts. And so I was like, oh, I want to write a new historical narrative where like, it's not Eurocentric. And we talk about the world from South Asia's perspective, from Mexico's perspective, from China's perspective, and not always Eurocentric. And so that was like, okay, this is what I'm interested in. Okay, well, does anyone else care? Most people don't actually give a shit about history. Like if you ask them, like, are you a history buff? But then I stepped back and was like, okay, where are the what times in our lives do people care about history? One is obviously in school. You have to care about it because you're being tested on it. Two is like on TV and like on screens. Like if there's a fun drama like The Crown, everyone loves history when it's like through The Crown, the TV show, or like fun movies. Like there's always a World War II movie. And then third is like when we travel, we like to go on tours and learn about like different cultures and different histories. So when I broke it down like that, I was like, okay, so we can be in one of these areas. And so I picked travel because I saw that as like the fastest growing and the area for most potential. So I moved to India, was like, all right, we are going to create these like awesome stories that change people's idea of what India was and therefore what India is. And we're going to do it in this really immersive way. We're going to create these on-demand podcast tours. It was a brilliant idea, if I say so myself, and it was working out great. And then in February of 2020, I was like, okay, we have validated the idea. Like there's clearly people are willing to pay for this. This is awesome. We've got great reviews. It's time to like incorporate this company and hire. Did so. Incorporation paperwork came like February 23rd. And then 2 weeks later, COVID became a thing and travel died. Travel literally died overnight. And so, yeah, that's one of the many ways starting at my own thing was hard in ways I could not expect.
Yeah.
So then it took like 6 months of recuperation. I had to figure out how to get out of India. That took 3 months. Then I had to figure out where I was going to live. That took another 3 months. Then I had to like be like, what just happened over the last year and a half? That took a couple of months. But by the end of 2020, I was like, okay, travel, we don't know when that's going to be a thing again. Let's go back to those two channels. There's school and there's screens. Okay, well, let's try screens now. Let's see if we can change the historical narrative that way. So I decided to work on a podcast, like this narrative nonfiction podcast, which I think maybe that's what you heard a snippet of. And so then I started pitching it to different podcast companies and production companies. So I spent like half of 2021 pitching it to anyone who would answer my email or answer my call. Could not find a partner that wanted to air this show that was like, either I found people that were like, this is amazing, but we have no idea how to reach the Desi American audience. And I'm like, with me, this is how, with this show. Or other people are like, this isn't really our style. And I'm like, okay. So pitch. Okay, it didn't work. No one wanted to run the show. Okay, so that's like mid 2021. Okay, so we've exhausted travel. Screens is maybe a possibility in the future, but no one wants to put it on a screen now. Okay, we can put it out ourselves, but then no one's going to listen. Let's think about this third channel, schools. So then we started working with high school history teachers to figure out, okay, how can we help them diversify their curriculum and widen the historical narrative? And it turns out they were very interested in having a podcast. So we actually got to go back to producing this podcast alongside curriculum for it. And so that's kind of where Kahaani is now, working on developing this media and this content to help high school teachers widen the historical narrative.
Let's go back a little bit. You mentioned that you moved to India. Why did you have to move to India? Why can't you just work on it here in North America?
Oh, because the idea was to teach history through travel. And so if the idea here is, so no one wants to learn about Indian history in Michigan, but if they're traveling to Bombay, then they want to take a tour. So I had to move there to be able to market to the tourists like on site, to be able to do as a one person business, I had to be able to like walk and measure the tour myself because we had it like GPS. We had it correlated with GPS. So we had to like tag the location.
Oh, wow.
Time it, all of that. So I had to be on the ground for all of that.
What? That's a lot of work.
Yes. Yes, it is a lot of work.
You got it done, though.
It happened. It existed. I'm glad some people got to take the tour. Others, hopefully, will get to take them in the future.
It will happen. It will happen. So I read that what inspired you starting Kahaani was you went to these caves. I forgot the name of the caves. I'm terrible with names.
The Ellora Caves.
The Ellora Caves. So I remember seeing this on Ripley's Believe It or Not when I was young.
No way.
Yes. They say like, oh, this is a whole, like, let's say city made out of rocks. I'm like, wait, what do you mean rocks? And yeah, they chiseled the whole city from a whole rock. I'm like, yo, that is insane. And I love that you said that if was in Europe, it will be on a poster. Everything it'll be marketed. But because it's India, no one gives a shit. Right? I'm going to ask you. So, yes, people will come and people will visit these places. But tourists, they're assholes. They'll ruin places. Are you not worried about that?
Very much so. And so the idea was, okay, if we are going to be part of every solution creates a new problem. So the idea here was, okay, we're going to be solving the issue of the historical narrative, which causes a lot of other issues, right? Like racism, identity issues. So we're going to solve that problem. In solving that problem, we might cause environmental issues in terms of destroying like the local environment. We might cause class inequality. We might do all these things. So how can we rectify or prevent those follow-on problems and instead make sure that we are benefiting the community and not taking away from it? And so at the time, the plan was to hire locally. So the people that would be selling on the ground the tours would be local people from those communities. So like local villagers in the case of the Ellora Caves. And then we were going to designate a certain amount of the profits from the tours to restoration and kind of renovations and beautification.
Mm-hmm. I like the plan. It's nice.
Yeah, plans are great.
Stay positive.
Well, they are plans.
You sold it to your dad. Believe it.
Exactly.
So, the podcast, are you going to continue it?
Yes. So the show, we're still in production because it's a narrative. It's a limited series narrative nonfiction podcast. So the first season is 6 episodes. Each episode is about 30 minutes. The plan is to launch the first episode next month in November.
Mm-hmm. And where are you going to release it?
It'll be on all podcast apps. You can choose your favorite one to listen to it.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to promote it, obviously. I think we're getting there. But before we end, do you have any more questions or topics or anything that you would like to add?
Oh, I mean, I'm so impressed by your level of research and the thought that you put into these questions. I had such a delightful time.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I try. I'm not
You succeeded.
Thank you. I'm not as accurate and I'm as not in depth as your research, which I love, but I try anyway.
You did well.
Thank you. All right. So before we end, would you want to promote your Kahaani again, the website, Instagram, whatever else?
Oh yeah, I would so love it if your listeners followed us on Kahaani on Instagram at Kahaani. That's with 2 A's. .io. If they like memes and like history told in memes, but if you like more elevated experiences, you should go to our website, which is just Kahaani, Kahaani.io. So both are Kahaani.io, whichever platform you choose.
Awesome. Thank you, Nikki, again for coming on the podcast. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you. I loved this. Thanks so much for your time.
No problem. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Bye.
Bye. Again, Nikki, thank you for coming on the podcast. I really do appreciate it. Thank you, listeners, for listening. This is Aaron Deliosa for An Immigrant's Life. I'll see you guys later.